In the frozen wilderness of Montana's Bitterroot Mountains, Emma Winters clutched her worn backpack as she trudged through knee-deep snow. The January blizzard whipped mercilessly against her face, carrying with it the echo of her father's final words that had shattered her world just hours before. "Get out. Don't come back until you've fixed this mess." The memory cut deeper than the biting cold as she fought to put one foot in front of the other. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma had been walking for hours since the Greyhound had dropped her at the last stop before the mountain roads became impassable. The small mountain town of Pinecrest was supposed to be her destination, a place where her late mother's sister lived, though they hadn't spoken in years. It was the only option Emma could think of when her father's rage had driven her from their Seattle apartment. The snow was falling faster now, obscuring the narrow mountain road. Emma's thin city jacket offered little protection against the brutal mountain winter. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably as she pressed one gloved hand against her still flat stomach. The secret she'd carried for 8 weeks had cost her everything: her home, her scholarship to Washington State, and the family she thought would stand by her no matter what. The decision to tell her father had taken every ounce of courage Emma possessed. She'd rehearsed the conversation 100 times, imagining different scenarios, hoping against hope that his love would overcome his disappointment. Instead, she'd watched his face contort with rage, heard him spew words of shame and dishonor, and felt the foundation of her 20 years crack beneath her feet. Now, as the daylight faded across the mountain valley, Emma faced the terrifying reality of having nowhere to go and the punishing storm closing in around her. Her phone had died hours ago, not that it mattered. There was no cell service this. Deep in the mountains, the Winters family had once been close. Before her mother's death from cancer 2 years ago, they'd been a unit, her father stern but loving, pushing Emma to excel academically while her mother balanced his intensity with warmth and understanding. After her mother died, something in her father had hardened. The grief transformed him into someone Emma barely recognized: bitter, controlling, and quick to anger. She'd been the perfect daughter, the one who made the dean's list every semester, who interned at his law firm on weekends, who had never given him a moment's worry. Until now. Emma's mind wandered back to 3 months ago when everything had seemed so different. She'd been dating Connor Phillips, a fellow pre-law student, since sophomore year. He was ambitious, brilliant, from a prominent Seattle family, everything her father approved of. They'd made plans together, talked about law school, about building careers at prestigious firms. But when she'd called him 2 weeks ago with the news that would change everything, his response had been swift and brutal. "That's not going to work for me, Emma," he'd said, his voice cold and distant. "I've got Yale law next year. Figure it out yourself." The line had gone dead, and with it any illusion Emma had harbored about love conquering all. Standing in the thickening snowfall, Emma replayed the conversation that had led to this moment. Her father, Richard Winters, had been reviewing case files in their apartment when Emma had finally gathered the courage to speak. The smell of his expensive scotch had filled the air, a comfort that now seemed like a luxury from another lifetime. "Dad," Emma had begun, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something important." Richard had looked up from his paperwork, his eyes immediately registering annoyance at the interruption. "What is it?" "I'm working." His tone was sharp, impatient. "I'm pregnant," Emma had whispered, the words falling into the room like stones. Into still water. The silence that followed was deafening. The crystal tumbler in her father's hand had stopped halfway to his mouth, suspended in the sudden stillness. His face had gone through a series of transformations: shock, disbelief, and finally a fury so deep it seemed to age him years and seconds. "What did you say?" Richard had breathed, setting down his glass with deliberate control that frightened Emma more than if he'd thrown it. but Emma's tears had been confirmation enough. What followed was a storm of emotions: her father's cold rage, his cutting accusations, her own stammering attempts to explain that this wasn't her plan, that she was as shocked as he was. "Who?" Richard had demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. "Who is responsible for this disgrace?" "It's not like that, Dad," Emma had tried to explain. "Connor and I, we were careful, but Connor Phillips?" Her father's laugh had been bitter and sharp. "The boy with the Yale acceptance letter? Where is this brilliant young man now? Did he offer to marry you? To take responsibility?" Emma had no answer for that. Connor's rejection still stung like an open wound, a betrayal that cut deeper than her father's anger. She'd tried to explain that she'd reached out to him, that he'd refused to even discuss their situation, but her words only seemed to fuel her father's fury. "You've thrown everything away," Richard had said, his voice low and dangerous. "The internship at Hargrove and Klein, your scholarship, everything we've worked for. For what? A boy who won't even stand by you?" Emma had pleaded with him, tears streaming down her face as she tried to make him understand. She'd promised to defer school for a year, to find a way to handle everything without disrupting their lives permanently. But Richard's mind was made up, his prestigious reputation and rigid values more important than his daughter's welfare. "You have until morning," he'd said with terrible finality. "Pack your things and get out. Don't come back until you've fixed this situation. The Winters name means something in this city, and I won't have you destroying everything I've built." Now Emma stood in the growing darkness, her entire life condensed into a single backpack. Inside were a few changes of clothes, her mother's photo, her laptop, and the small amount of money she'd saved from her campus job. It wasn't nearly enough to start a new life, especially not with a baby on the way. The cold was becoming dangerous. Emma's fingers and toes had gone numb, and her exhaustion made each step more difficult than the last. In the distance, through the curtain of snow, she thought she saw a light faint and flickering, but undeniably there. With renewed determination, she forced her frozen legs to move toward it, praying it wasn't a hallucination born of desperation and hypothermia. As she drew closer, the light resolved into the glow of windows. A cabin substantial and sturdy stood nestled among towering pines, smoke curling from its chimney into the storm-dark sky. Emma's heart pounded with relief and apprehension. Who lived this far from town? Would they help a stranger, or turn her away into the deadly night? With no other options, Emma stumbled the final distance to the cabin's porch. The wooden steps creaked beneath her weight as she raised a trembling hand to knock on the heavy door. For several heartbeats, there was no response. Then, a shuffling sound approached from within. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The door swung open, releasing a wave of blessed warmth and the scent of wood smoke. A man filled the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and penetrating eyes that widened at the sight of Emma swaying on his porch. "Good God," he said, his deep voice tinged with shock. "What are you doing out in this storm?" Before Emma could answer, the world tilted sideways. Her vision tunneled to darkness as her frozen body finally surrendered to exhaustion. Emma drifted back to consciousness gradually, aware first of warmth, blessed, encompassing warmth, and then of soft blankets tucked around her. She was lying on a couch near a crackling fireplace, her wet clothes replaced with an oversized flannel shirt and thick wool socks. For a moment, confusion clouded her mind. Where was she? How had she gotten here? Then the memories rushed back, the devastating conversation with her father, the grueling trek through the mountains, the cabin appearing like a mirage in the blizzard. Emma struggled to sit up, her body aching with the aftermath of exposure to the elements. "Careful there," came a deep voice from across the room. "You've been out for a while." Emma turned to see the bearded man watching her from a wooden rocking chair. In the firelight, she could see him more clearly, perhaps. In his mid-30s, with weathered skin that spoke of a life outdoors. His dark hair and beard were flecked with silver, and his eyes, a startling shade of blue, studied her with concern. "Where am I?" Emma managed, her voice hoarse. "My cabin," he replied simply. "About 15 miles from Pinecrest. I'm Jack." Blackwood. He stood and moved to a small kitchen area, returning with a steaming mug. "Herbal tea. It'll help warm you from the inside." Emma accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. "Thank you for helping me. I'm Emma Winters." Jack nodded, settling back into his chair. "What brings a city girl out to these mountains in the middle of a blizzard, Emma Winters?" There was no judgment in his tone, just genuine curiosity mixed with concern. Something about his straightforward manner made Emma want to tell him the truth, but years of her father's emphasis on privacy and discretion held her back. "I was trying to reach Pinecrest," she said instead. "My aunt lives there. The bus dropped me at the highway junction, but I underestimated the distance and the weather." Jack's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he sensed there was more to her story. But he didn't press. "You're lucky I found you when I did." Another hour in that cold, and things would have been much worse. He gestured toward the windows, where snow continued to fall in dense sheets. Storms not letting up. "Roads to Pinecrest will be closed for at least 3 days, according to the radio." The news hit Emma like a physical blow. 3 more days stranded in the wilderness? What would she do? Where would she go? As if reading her thoughts, Jack spoke again, his voice matter of fact. "You'll stay here until the road's clear. There's plenty of food, and the cabin's warm." He paused, then added, "I know it's not ideal to be stuck with a stranger, but it's better than the alternative." Emma's eyes filled with tears at this unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here." Jack's expression softened slightly. "Nobody should be out in weather like this. Especially not." He stopped abruptly, and Emma saw something flicker in his eyes. "Especially not what?" she asked. Jack hesitated, then spoke carefully. "When I found you unconscious, I had to check your vitals, make sure you weren't hypothermic. I noticed certain things. Medical things." His eyes met hers directly. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach, though there was no visible sign yet of the life growing inside her. She thought about lying, about denying it, but what was the point? This stranger had already saved her life once. Maybe honesty was the least she owed him. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "About 8 weeks." Jack nodded, accepting this information without visible reaction. "Thought so." The pulse patterns were distinctive. At Emma's surprised look, he added, "I was a combat medic in Afghanistan, 2 tours." That explained his calm efficiency, the clinical way he'd assessed her condition. Emma relaxed slightly, relieved that her secret had been discovered by someone with medical training, rather than just a random mountain dweller. "Is that why you're heading to Pinecrest?" Jack asked. "Because of the pregnancy?" The question was direct but not unkind. Emma found herself nodding slowly. "My father threw me out when I told him. My boyfriend wants nothing to do with it. My aunt in Pinecrest is the only family I have left, though we haven't spoken in years." Jack's face darkened momentarily. "Your father threw you out? In winter? Knowing you were pregnant?" "He gave me until morning to leave," Emma said, surprised by the anger in Jack's voice. "He said not to come back until I'd fixed the situation." Understanding dawned in Jack's eyes. "And you chose not to fix it?" "I couldn't," Emma said simply. "It didn't feel right. Not for me." Jack was silent for a long moment, the only sound in the cabin the popping of the fire and the howl of wind outside. Finally he stood, moving to add another log to the flames. "Well," he said, his back to her, "you've got grit, I'll give you that. Walking through a blizzard rather than doing something against your conscience." He turned to face her firelight, casting his features in sharp relief. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps." That night, Emma slept better than she had since discovering her pregnancy. The combination of physical exhaustion, emotional drain, and the unexpected safety of Jack's cabin allowed her to sink into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, pale winter sunlight was filtering through frost-covered windows, and the smell of coffee and cooking food filled the cabin. Jack was at the wood-burning stove, deftly flipping pancakes in a cast-iron skillet. He glanced over as Emma sat up, brushing hair from her face. "Morning," he said. "Thought you might be hungry. Pancakes, okay? There's also eggs if you prefer." "Pancakes sound amazing," Emma replied, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "Can I help with anything?" Jack shook his head. "Just take care of yourself. Bathroom's through that door if you want to freshen up. I left some clean clothes in there. They'll be too big, but they're warm." The bathroom was small but surprisingly modern, with running water and even a shower. Emma washed her face and brushed her teeth with the new toothbrush Jack had left out. The clothes flannel shirt, wool sweater, and jeans with a belt to cinch the waist swallowed her slender frame. But Jack was right. They were warm and comfortable. When she emerged, a stack of pancakes waited at the small wooden table, along with syrup, butter, and a glass of milk. Jack was already eating, his movements efficient and economical. "Thank you for all of this," Emma said, taking a seat across from him. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Jack shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Don't need repayment for basic decency." As they ate, Emma took the opportunity to properly observe her surroundings. The cabin was larger than it had first appeared, a main room with a kitchen and living area, plus at least 2 other doors that presumably led to bedrooms. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with volumes on diverse subjects: medical texts, wilderness survival, classic literature, and modern fiction. Large windows framed views of snow-covered mountains and dense pine forest. "Your home is beautiful," Emma said, genuinely impressed. "Have you lived here long?" "Something in." Jack's expression closed off slightly. 5 years, he said shortly. Then, perhaps realizing his abruptness, he added, "After my last tour, I needed space, quiet. This place provides both." Emma nodded, understanding that there were depths to Jack Blackwood that he wasn't ready to share. She respected his privacy, just as he had respected hers by not pushing for more details about her situation. After breakfast, Jack turned on a battery-powered radio to check weather reports. The news wasn't good. The storm had dropped over 3 feet of snow, and more was expected. Roads to Pinecrest would remain impassable for at least another week. "I can't impose on you for a week," Emma protested, horrified at the thought of being such a burden. "Isn't there some way to get to town?" Jack shook his head. "Not unless you can snowshoe 15 miles through mountain terrain, and in your condition, that's not happening." He regarded her thoughtfully. "It's no imposition. I've got plenty of supplies, and honestly, some company makes a nice change." There was something in his tone, a hint of loneliness perhaps, that made Emma wonder how isolated Jack's life truly was out here. Did he ever have visitors, friends, family? The cabin, for all its comfort, had the feeling of a solitary life. "At least let me earn my keep," Emma insisted. "I can cook, clean, help with whatever needs doing." Jack seemed about to refuse, then apparently thought better of it. "Fair enough. Rest today, though. Your body's still recovering from hypothermia." Emma spent the day dozing on the couch, reading from Jack's extensive library and watching him move about his daily routines. He checked generators, brought in firewood, and spent several hours in what appeared to be a workshop attached to the back of the cabin. When he returned, his hands were covered in wood dust. "What do you do out there?" Emma asked curiously. Jack seemed hesitant, then said, I make furniture, tables, chairs, cabinets. Sell them in Pinecrest and some of the larger towns when I go in for supplies. You're a carpenter? Emma was surprised. Somehow, with his medical background, she'd expected something different. Among other things, Jack replied. Out here, you learn to be self-sufficient. Carpentry, hunting, basic mechanics, first aid, they're all survival skills. As evening approached, Jack prepared a hearty stew that simmered all afternoon, filling the cabin with rich, savory aromas. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the constant background music of the wind in the pines. After dinner, as Jack stoked the fire for the night, Emma gathered her courage to ask the question that had been on her mind all day. Jack, she began hesitantly, why are you helping me like this? You don't know me. I could be anyone. Jack was silent for so long that Emma thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost as if he were talking to himself. My wife was pregnant when I was deployed the second time. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief. 8 months along. There were complications. She tried to drive herself to the hospital during a snowstorm. He stared into the flames, his profile carved in sharp relief. She never made it. The simple tragedy of his words struck Emma like a physical blow. I'm so sorry, she whispered, understanding now the shadows that haunted his eyes. Jack nodded. Once, acknowledging her sympathy without meeting her gaze. That was 6 years ago. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if someone had found her, helped her. He finally looked at Emma, his blue eyes reflecting firelight. I couldn't save them. But I can help you. The raw honesty of his confession left Emma speechless. This man, who had experienced such profound loss, was channeling his grief into an act of extraordinary kindness for a complete stranger. The realization humbled her. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. And thank you for saving my life. Jack's smile was brief but genuine. Get some rest, Emma. Tomorrow's another day. That night, as Emma drifted towards sleep on the comfortable couch, she found herself thinking about the strange turns life could take. A week ago, she had been a college student with a clear path forward. Now she was pregnant, homeless, and sheltering in a mountain cabin with a widowed veteran, whose own tragedy had somehow prepared him to be her unexpected savior. For the first time since her world had collapsed, Emma felt something like hope stirring in her chest. Not because her problems were solved, they were still enormous and daunting, but because she wasn't facing them completely alone anymore. In this remote wilderness, she had found an unexpected ally in Jack Blackwood, a man who understood loss and resilience in ways that gave her courage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, safe in the warmth of the cabin while the winter wind sang through the pines outside, Emma allowed herself to believe that somehow she would find her way forward for herself and for the child she was determined to protect. The days at Jack's cabin settled into a rhythm that surprised Emma with its peacefulness. Despite the blizzard raging outside, trapping her far from civilization, she found an unexpected sanctuary within these wooden walls. As the storm continued, Emma's body slowly recovered from the hypothermia and exhaustion. With each passing day, her strength returned, and she began to participate more in the daily routines that maintained the cabin. Jack was unlike anyone Emma had ever known. He moved through his world with quiet competence, each action deliberate and purposeful. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary words. In the mornings, he would rise before dawn, stoke the fire, and disappear outside to check generators and clear snow from critical areas. When he returned, dusted with snow and smelling of pine and cold, he'd prepare breakfast as if feeding a guest were the most natural thing in the world. On the third morning, Emma insisted on cooking. "You've done enough," she said firmly, taking the cast-iron skillet from his hands. "I may not be a wilderness expert, but I can handle scrambled eggs." Jack had stepped back, a flicker of amusement crossing his normally stoic features. "By all means," he said, raising his hands in surrender. As Emma moved around the small kitchen, she found herself humming softly, a habit her mother had always teased her about. When she glanced up, she caught Jack watching her, something unreadable in his expression. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "Nothing," he replied, turning away to add wood to the fire. "It's just been a while since anyone cooked in this kitchen besides me." The simple admission hinted at the depth of his solitude, and Emma wondered again what had driven this clearly capable man to such an isolated existence. His tragic past explained part of it, but she sensed there was more wounds that ran deeper than even the loss of his wife and unborn child. After breakfast, Emma stood at the window, watching the snow continue its relentless descent. "Does it ever stop?" she asked, partly to herself. "Eventually," Jack replied, coming to stand beside her. "This is the worst storm in years, though. Makes me wonder what you did to anger the weather gods." It was the closest thing to a joke she'd heard from him, and Emma found herself laughing a sound that seemed to surprise them both. "My father would say it's divine punishment," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Jack's expression hardened. "Your father sounds like a real piece of work." "He wasn't always," Emma said, feeling a strange need to defend. "The man who had thrown her out. Before my mom died, he was different, strict but loving. He wanted the best for me. And now?" Emma sighed, pressing her palm against the cold window. "Now he wants perfection. The right school, the right career, the right reputation. A grandchild born out of wedlock doesn't fit the plan." Jack was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the distant mountains barely visible through the snowfall. "Plans change," he said finally. "Life happens. Anyone who can't adapt isn't worth following." There was such certainty in his voice that Emma found herself wondering about his own discarded plans, what life he might have imagined before tragedy struck. "What was she like?" Emma asked softly. "Your wife?" Jack stiffened, and for a moment Emma thought she'd overstepped. But then his shoulders relaxed and he turned from the window. "Vivian was—" he paused, searching for words. "She was alive in a way most people aren't. Passionate about everything, her work as a wildlife biologist, her garden, the stars. At night, she could name every constellation and tell you the stories behind them." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "She dragged me out here, you know. I was a city boy before I met her. She said mountains heal what medicine can't." "She sounds wonderful," Emma said, touched by the rare glimpse into Jack's heart. "She was," he agreed simply. Then, as if uncomfortable with having revealed so much, he moved away from the window. "I need to check the generator. Storm like this could knock out power any time." Emma watched him pull on his heavy coat and disappear into the swirling white. His grief was still raw. She realized not a scar, but an open wound he lived with daily. Yet somehow, he had channeled that pain into creating this self-sufficient life, finding purpose in solitude and craftsmanship. Later that afternoon, Jack invited Emma to see his workshop, a surprising gesture that she recognized as significant. The space was immaculate, tools arranged with military precision on pegboards, wood sorted by type and size on sturdy shelves. In the center stood a partially completed dining table, its cherry wood gleaming with natural oils. "This is beautiful," Emma said, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "You're really talented." Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "It passes the time, keeps my hands busy." "Is that why you started, to keep busy?" Jack picked up a piece of sandpaper, absently smoothing a rough edge on the table. "Partly, after Vivian died, I couldn't sleep. Nightmares from my deployment. Mixed with," he paused, "mixed with finding her car. The wooden crosses they put by accident sites, I couldn't stop seeing it, so I started making things instead. He gestured around the workshop. There's something honest about working. With wood, it doesn't lie or pretend. Every piece has its grain, its knots, its natural strengths and weaknesses. You can't force it to be something it's not. You have to work with what it is. The philosophy resonated with Emma, who had spent years trying to force herself into the mold her father had created, the perfect daughter, the future lawyer, the credit to the Winters name. I've been trying to be someone I'm not for a long time, she admitted. Maybe that's why everything fell apart. I was going against my grain. Jack looked at her directly then, his blue eyes searching. And who are you, Emma Winters? When you strip away what everyone else wants you to be. The question was profound in its simplicity, cutting to the heart of her current crisis. Who was she, really? Not her father's ambitious daughter. Not Connor's convenient girlfriend. Not a pre-law student following a predetermined path. I don't know yet, she answered honestly. But I think this baby is forcing me to find out. Jack nodded as if her answer satisfied him. That's a start. Most people go their whole lives without asking the question. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That evening, a new intimacy had developed between them, not romantic, but the comfortable familiarity of two people who had glimpsed each other's true selves. They sat before the fire, mugs of herbal tea in hand, while Jack told her more about his life with Vivian and their dreams for the child they had lost. We were going to name him Daniel after her father, Jack said, his voice soft with memory. The nursery was all set up. Yellow walls because Viv said it was the color of hope. I'm so sorry, Jack, Emma said, her heart aching for his loss. He nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. What about you? Have you thought about names? The question surprised Emma. In the chaos of her father's rejection and her desperate journey to find her aunt, she hadn't allowed herself to think that far ahead. Not really, she admitted. It still doesn't feel quite real sometimes. It will, Jack assured her, once you feel the first movements. There's nothing like it. The way he spoke with such certainty and gentleness made Emma wonder if he'd felt his own child move before the accident that took both wife and baby. Were you scared? She asked. About becoming a father? Jack's laugh was short but genuine. Terrified. I'd seen the worst humanity could do in Afghanistan. Wasn't sure I had any business bringing a child into such a world. His expression softened. But Viv said that was exactly why we needed to have children, to raise them with hope and compassion, to make the world better. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, imagining the family that might have been. She was right. She usually was, Jack agreed, staring into the fire. After a moment, he added, What about the father of your baby? This Connor, is there any chance he'll come around? Emma shook her head firmly. No. And honestly, I don't want him to. Not now. He showed me who he really is when things got difficult. I don't need that kind of weakness in my child's life. Jack's approving nod warmed her more than she expected. Smart. Better no father than one who can't be counted on. Is that what you think I should do? Emma asked, suddenly curious about his perspective. Raise the baby alone? Jack considered the question seriously. I think you should do whatever feels right to you. Being a single parent is hard, but not as hard as being tied to someone who doesn't want to be there. He set down his mug. But you don't have to figure it all out tonight. One step at a time. The phrase became something of a mantra over the next few days as the storm gradually weakened. One step at a time, Emma helped Jack with the daily chores that kept the cabin functioning. One step at a time, she learned to split kindling for the fire, to operate the ham radio that was Jack's emergency connection to the outside world, to identify the birds that visited the feeding stations he maintained even in the worst weather. And one step at a time, she began to imagine a future different from anything she'd previously considered. A future where she made her own choices based on her own values, not those imposed by her father or expected by society. On the 5th day, the snow finally stopped. The world outside was transformed into a glistening white landscape, pristine and silent in the aftermath of the storm. Emma stood on the porch, bundled in Jack's spare coat, marveling at the beauty and stillness. "It's like the whole world has been made new," she said as Jack joined her. He nodded, scanning the sky. "Roads should be cleared in a day or two. County plows will reach the main road to Pinecrest first." The reminder that her time at the cabin was limited sent an unexpected pang through Emma, as much as she needed. To find her aunt and establish some kind of permanent situation before the baby came. The thought of leaving the sanctuary she'd found with Jack was surprisingly painful. "What will you tell your aunt?" Jack asked, seeming to read her thoughts. "About the baby?" Emma sighed. "The truth, I suppose. Though I'm not sure how she'll react. She and my mother were close, but they had a falling out years ago. I'm not even sure she knows Mom died." Jack frowned. "You're pinning your hopes on someone you haven't spoken to in years? Someone who might not even take you in." Put that way, Emma's plan seemed even more desperate than she'd realized. "I don't have many options," she admitted. "At least she's family." "Family," Jack repeated, the word sounding hollow in his mouth. "The same family that includes the father who threw you out in a blizzard?" His bluntness stung, but Emma couldn't deny the truth in his words. Blood ties had proven meaningless when her need was greatest. What guarantee did she have that her aunt would be any different? "I have to try," she said finally. "I need somewhere to go, Jack. I can't raise a baby in a college dorm, even if they'd let me back in. I need stability, a home." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the distant mountains. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, hesitant, almost vulnerable. "You could stay here." The words hung in the crystal air between them. Emma stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" Jack turned to face her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "You could stay here, at the cabin, until you figure things out, or longer if you wanted." Emma's heart raced with confusion and a strange hope. "Jack, I couldn't impose on you like that. You've already done so much. It's not an imposition." He interrupted. "This place is too big for one person. Has been for years. There's a spare bedroom I've been using for storage. It could be yours. Or a nursery, eventually." He ran a hand through his beard, clearly uncomfortable with his own impulsiveness but pressing on. "I'm not proposing anything inappropriate, Emma. Just offering a safe place for you and your baby." Emma was speechless, overwhelmed by the generosity of his offer. "But why would you do that? You barely know me." Jack's smile was tinged with sadness. "Maybe because I couldn't save Viv and our son, but I can help you. Maybe because this cabin has been too quiet for too long." He paused, then added softly, "Maybe because my cabin needs a queen." The phrase was so unexpected, almost poetic, coming from the stoic mountain man, that Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. She remembered his earlier words about working with wood, about respecting its natural grain and character. Was that how he saw her? Not as someone to be molded into a predetermined shape, but as a person whose true nature should be honored. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to decide now," Jack said, turning back to the mountains. "Think about it. The offer stands either way." That night, Emma lay awake on the couch, her mind racing with possibilities. Jack's offer represented something she hadn't dared hope for, not just shelter, but a genuine partnership with someone who seemed to understand her in ways her own father never had. It wasn't romantic love he was offering, but something perhaps more valuable: respect, safety, and a chance to build a life on her own terms. But was it right to accept? To bring her child into this remote existence, away from schools and doctors, and the normal social structures most children took for granted. What kind of life would they have, isolated in these mountains with a man still haunted by his own losses? Then again, what was the alternative? Imposing on an aunt she barely knew. Struggling alone in some city, working minimum wage jobs while trying to afford childcare. Crawling back to her father and accepting whatever conditions he might impose. As dawn broke over the snow-covered landscape, Emma made her decision. She would go to Pinecrest as planned, find her aunt, and explain her situation. But she would also tell her about Jack's offer, and make her choice with clear eyes and an open heart, not from desperation, but from a place of knowing her own worth, and what she truly wanted for herself and her child. Outside, birds began their morning songs, and Emma heard Jack moving about, preparing for another day. Whatever happened next, she knew she had found something precious in this mountain cabin, not just temporary shelter, but a glimpse of what it meant to live authentically, to face loss without being destroyed by it, and to offer kindness without expectation of return. One step at a time, she reminded herself. The future would unfold as it should. The morning revealed a world transformed by the storm's passing. Sunlight glittered across pristine snowdrifts, and the sky stretched endlessly blue above the pine-covered mountains. Emma stood on the porch, breathing in air so clear and cold it made her lungs ache, watching as Jack moved methodically around the property, assessing damage and clearing critical paths. There was something mesmerizing about his efficiency, the economy of his movements. In the city, Emma had known men who performed masculinity like a theatrical role, her father with his expensive suits and commanding presence, Connor with his practiced charm and calculated ambition. Jack simply was, without pretense or performance. And the contrast was startling. When he returned to the cabin, his cheeks reddened by cold and exertion, he carried an armful of firewood and news from his ham radio. "Plows have reached the main highway," he reported, stacking logs by the hearth. "They're working on the county roads now. Should reach the turnoff to Pinecrest by tomorrow morning." Emma nodded, feeling a complicated mix of relief and regret. "That's good news." Jack studied her face, his expression unreadable. "Is it?" The simple question hung between them, laden with meaning. Before Emma could respond, Jack continued, "I meant what I said yesterday, about you staying. It wasn't a momentary impulse." "I believe you," Emma said softly, "and I'm grateful beyond words. But I need to at least try to find my aunt, to see if that door is open before I make any decisions." Jack nodded, accepting her reasoning without argument. "Fair enough. When the road's clear, I'll drive you into Pinecrest. Make sure you get there safely." The matter-of-fact offer touched Emma deeply. Even now, knowing she might leave, Jack's concern for her welfare remained constant. "Thank you," she said, wishing the words weren't so inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. Jack shrugged, uncomfortable as always with thanks. It's the right thing to do. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Jack announced that the county plows had reached the road to Pinecrest, and they would leave after breakfast. Emma packed her meager belongings into her backpack, adding a few items Jack had insisted she take: warmer gloves, a proper winter hat, a thermos for hot tea. The drive into town was breathtaking. Jack's sturdy truck navigated the plowed but still treacherous mountain roads with ease, climbing and descending through forests that seemed like something from a fairy tale, branches heavy with snow and sunlight filtering through in golden shafts. "It's so beautiful," Emma said, watching a family of deer bound across a meadow. "I can see why Vivian loved it here." Jack's hands tightened briefly on the steering wheel. "She used to say we had front row seats to the greatest show on earth. Every season bringing something new." They crested a final ridge, and Pinecrest appeared below them, a small cluster of buildings nestled in a valley, smoke rising from chimneys into the clear mountain air. It looked impossibly picturesque, like a town inside a snow globe. "What's your aunt's name?" Jack asked as they began the descent. "Marlene Shepherd," Emma replied. "Mom's younger sister. She owns, or at least she used to own, a bookstore." "In town," Jack nodded. "Shepherd Books. It's still there. One of the few independent shops left." The knowledge that her aunt's business had survived was encouraging. Perhaps her personal life had remained stable as well. They reached the town limits, the truck's tires crunching on freshly salted streets. Pinecrest was smaller than Emma had imagined, just a few blocks of storefronts surrounding a central square, with residential streets branching outward like spokes from a wheel. Despite its size, the town had a bustling energy, with people out clearing walkways and children building snowmen in front yards. Jack parked in front of a charming storefront with large windows displaying colorful book covers. A hand-painted sign above the door read "Shepherd Books" in elegant script. "Do you want me to come in with you?" Jack asked, his tone carefully neutral. Emma considered the offer. Part of her wanted his solid presence beside her for this uncertain reunion, but another part knew this was something she needed to do alone. "I think I should do this myself," she said finally. "But would you mind waiting, just in case?" Jack nodded, understanding her unspoken concern. "I'll be right here. Take your time." Emma took a deep breath, shouldered her backpack, and stepped out into the cold. The bell above the bookstore door jingled cheerfully as she entered, announcing her arrival to the empty shop. The interior was warm and inviting, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable reading nooks, and a rich scent of paper, leather, and coffee. "Be right with you," called a voice from the back room. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. She recognized that voice, though it had been years since she'd heard it. The last time had been at her mother's funeral, where her aunt and father had engaged in a bitter argument that ended with Marlene storming out before the service was complete. A moment later, a woman emerged from behind a curtained doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. She was in her early 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the same green eyes Emma saw in the mirror each morning. Those eyes widened in shock as they registered who stood in her shop. "Emma?" Marlene breathed, frozen in place. "Emma Winters?" "Hello, Aunt Marlene," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's been a long time." Marlene moved forward slowly, as if approaching a vision that might disappear. "My God, you're the image of your mother." Her gaze swept over Emma, taking in every detail. "What are you doing here? Does your father know you're in Pinecrest?" The questions were exactly what Emma had expected, but they still stung. "No," she answered simply. "He doesn't. And I'd prefer to keep it that way." Something in her tone must have communicated the seriousness of her situation, because Marlene's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "What's happened, Emma? Are you in trouble?" Before Emma could answer, the bell above the door chimed again. Jack entered, bringing with him a gust of cold air and his imposing presence. Marlene's eyes darted between them, confusion evident on her face. "I saw you sitting there," Jack explained to Emma. "Thought you might want your thermos after all. It's still pretty cold out." The thoughtful gesture nearly undid Emma's composure. She accepted the thermos with a grateful smile, then turned back to her increasingly bewildered aunt. "Aunt Marlene, this is Jack Blackwood. He saved my life during the blizzard." She paused, then added, "Jack, this is my aunt, Marlene Shepherd." Marlene's confusion deepened. "Saved your life?" "Emma, what on earth is going on?" Emma exchanged a glance with Jack, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, she faced her aunt. "I need to talk to you," she said, "about a lot of things. Is there somewhere private we can go?" Marlene studied her niece's face, then nodded decisively. "Of course, we'll go upstairs to my apartment." She turned to Jack. "Mr. Blackwood, would you care to join us?" Jack shook his head. "This is family business. I'll wait in the truck." He paused, then added, "Unless Emma wants me to stay." The question in his eyes was clear. He would stand by her if she needed him, regardless of his own discomfort with the situation. Emma felt a rush of gratitude for this man who had become her unexpected champion. "I'll be okay," she assured him. "Thank you, Jack." With a nod to both women, Jack departed, leaving Emma to face her aunt and the uncertain reception that awaited. Her story. Marlene Shepard's apartment above the bookstore was cozy and welcoming, with shelves lining every available wall space and comfortable, if slightly worn, furniture arranged to take advantage of the natural light from large windows. She led Emma to a small kitchen table, putting on a kettle for tea with the efficiency of long habit. "Now," Marlene said, settling across from her niece, "tell me what's brought you to my doorstep after all these years." Emma wrapped her cold fingers around the mug of tea her aunt had placed before her, drawing strength from its warmth. Where to begin? With her father's rejection? The long journey through the storm? Jack's unexpected kindness? Or the root cause of it all, the new life growing inside her? "I'm pregnant," she said finally, deciding that honesty was the only path forward. 8 weeks along. Marlene's eyebrows rose, but her expression remained neutral. "I see." She studied Emma's face. "And your father's reaction?" "He threw me out," Emma said, the words still painful to speak aloud. "Told me not to come back until I'd fixed the situation." Anger flashed across Marlene's features. "That sounds like Richard. Always more concerned with appearances than with actual human beings." She reached across the table and covered Emma's hand with her own. "I'm so sorry, honey. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not by a parent." The simple validation, so different from her father's cold rejection, brought tears to Emma's eyes. "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted. "You're the only family I have left." "What about the baby's father?" Marlene asked gently. Emma gave a bitter laugh. "Connor made it very clear that a baby doesn't fit with his Yale Law School plans. He told me to figure it out myself." "Charming," Marlene muttered. Another man thinking women's bodies and choices are somehow inconvenient to his ambitions. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "So you came here, in the middle of the worst blizzard in a decade, looking for me?" Emma nodded. "The bus dropped me at the highway junction. I thought I could walk to town, but I underestimated the distance and the weather. If Jack hadn't found me when he did." She trailed off, the memory of that desperate cold still vivid in her mind. "Jack Blackwood," Marlene said, a note of surprise in her voice. "The mountain hermit himself. He rarely comes to town, and when he does, he keeps to himself." "How did you end up with him?" "His cabin was the only light I could see." "In the storm," Emma explained. "I made it to his porch before I collapsed. He took me in, warmed me up, let me stay until the roads cleared." She paused, then added, "He's been incredibly kind." Marlene studied her niece's face. "And now he's driven you into town, and he's waiting outside my shop. That doesn't sound like the solitary woodworker most people in Pinecrest describe." "He wanted to make sure I got here safely," Emma said, realizing how unusual Jack's behavior might seem to someone who knew his reputation for reclusiveness. Marlene murmured, something knowing in her expression. "Well, that's a story for another time, perhaps." She straightened in her chair. "The important question now is what you plan to do next. Have you made any decisions about the baby?" "I'm keeping it," Emma said firmly. "That's non-negotiable. Beyond that," she shrugged helplessly, "I haven't figured it all out yet." Marlene nodded, approval warming her eyes. "Good for you. Making your own choices, regardless of what Richard or this Connor fellow think." She tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. "You're welcome to stay here, Emma. I have a spare room. It's small, but it would be yours for as long as you need it." Relief flooded through Emma at her aunt's unconditional offer. "Thank you," she whispered. "I wasn't sure you'd want me here after everything that happened with you and Dad." Your father and I have our issues, Marlene acknowledged. Serious ones. But none of that has anything to do with you. She reached across the table again, squeezing Emma's hand. You're Catherine's daughter. My sister loved you more than life itself. I would never turn you away. The mention of her mother opened a well of grief Emma had kept carefully contained for 2 years. I miss her so much, she said, tears spilling over. She would have known what to do. She would have stood up to Dad. Yes, she would have, Marlene agreed, her own eyes glistening. Kat was always the brave one in our family. Standing up. To our father, then to yours when he started showing the same controlling tendencies. She shook her head. I should have been there for you after she died. I'm sorry I let my anger at Richard keep me away. It's okay, Emma assured her. I understand Dad can be difficult. That's a diplomatic way of putting it, Marlene said with a short laugh. But enough about him. Tell me about you, Emma. What do you want for yourself? For your future? The question echoed Jack's from days earlier, and Emma found herself giving the same honest answer. I'm still figuring that out. I know I don't want to be a lawyer. That was Dad's dream, not mine. I've always loved literature, writing, but beyond that, she shrugged. I'm taking it one step at a time. A sensible approach, Marlene approved. You don't have to have all the answers today, or tomorrow, or even next year. She stood, moving to refill their tea mugs. But I'm used to it. He paused, then added, How about you? Settling in, okay? Emma nodded. Aunt Marlene has been wonderful. The work at the bookstore keeps me busy, gives me time to think about what comes next. And the baby? The question was asked with such genuine concern that Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Everything seems fine so far. Marlene found me a doctor in the next town over. First appointment is next week. Jack looked relieved. Good. That's good. He hesitated, then said, I meant what I said before, Emma, about coming to visit the cabin when you're feeling up to it. The road should be clear enough now. I'd like that, Emma replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Despite the comfort of her aunt's home and the warm welcome she'd received in Pinecrest, there was something about Jack's mountain sanctuary that called to her, a peace she hadn't found anywhere else. This weekend? He suggested the invitation, clearly costing him some effort. Could show you the workshop properly. Maybe teach you some basic woodworking, if you're interested. The offer was so unexpected and so perfectly aligned with what Emma had been craving, something creative. Something that used her hands rather than just her mind, that she agreed immediately. I'd love that, Jack. Thank you. As he drove away, Emma felt a lightness in her spirit that had been missing for too long. She was building a life here, not the one she'd planned, certainly, but perhaps one that was truer to who she really was, with Marlene's support, the community's acceptance, and now Jack's continued presence. The future no longer seemed like a threatening void, but a canvas of possibilities. That night, as she prepared for bed, Emma stood at her dormer window, looking out at the moon-silvered mountains in the distance. Somewhere up there, Jack was in his cabin, perhaps working on another beautiful creation by lamplight. The thought brought a smile to her lips and a warm certainty to her heart. This wasn't the end of their story, it was just the beginning. The weekend couldn't come quickly enough. By Saturday morning, Emma was practically vibrating with anticipation as she waited for Jack's truck to appear in the town square. Marlene watched her niece's excitement with knowing eyes but made no comment beyond a gentle reminder to be careful on those mountain roads. When Jack finally arrived, exactly on time, Emma was struck again by how right it felt to see him. In just the few weeks since they'd met, this quiet, steady man had become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The drive back to the cabin was filled with a comfortable silence that neither felt compelled to break. Emma watched the scenery transform as they climbed higher into the mountains, the town giving way to pristine wilderness that seemed untouched by human concerns or complications. "I missed this," she admitted as they neared the cabin. "The quiet, the clean air. Everything seems simpler up here." Jack nodded in understanding. "It's why I stayed after Viv. Couldn't handle the noise of people anymore, not just the sound, but the emotional noise. Up here, things make sense. They follow natural laws. Predictable." It was perhaps the most he'd ever said at once about his choice to live in isolation, and Emma recognized the gift of his openness. "Does it get lonely?" she asked gently. Jack's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Less so since." He glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "Since you stayed." Reminded me what it was like to have someone to talk to cook for, to worry about. The simple honesty of his words touched Emma deeply. For all his reticence, Jack had a way of cutting through pretense to the heart of things. The cabin came into view, looking exactly as Emma remembered it, solid and welcoming against the winter landscape. As they pulled up to the porch, she felt an unexpected sense of homecoming, as if some part of her recognized this place as a sanctuary. Jack showed her to the workshop as promised, and Emma spent the morning learning the basics of woodworking. Under his patient guidance, his teaching style was practical and direct, demonstrating techniques, explaining the properties of different woods, then stepping back to let her try her hand at simple tasks. By midday, Emma had created a small, rudimentary box that Jack praised with genuine appreciation for her first effort. "You have good hands," he told her. "Steady, patient. Most beginners rush, try to force the wood. You're listening to it." The compliment warmed her more than she expected. In her father's world, success was measured by test scores, class rankings, and prestigious connections. Jack valued something entirely different: attentiveness, respect for materials, willingness to learn through doing rather than theorizing. They shared a simple lunch by the fire, talking easily about books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they'd held before life had intervened with its own plans. Emma was struck by how comfortable she felt with Jack, how natural their conversations had become despite his tendency toward brevity. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they finished eating. "Something personal?" Jack tensed slightly but nodded, his blue eyes steady on hers. "Do you regret it? Coming up here, living alone all these years? Do you ever wonder what might have been if you'd stayed in the world?" It was a question Emma had been pondering. About her own future. What would she be giving up if she chose a life here in these mountains, away from the opportunities and connections of urban life? Jack was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I needed this place," he said finally. "After Afghanistan, after losing Viv and the baby, I was broken in ways I couldn't explain. Being here, working with my hands, following the rhythms of nature, instead of man-made schedules, it healed something in me." He paused, his gaze drifting to the window and the snow-covered forest beyond. "But lately I've been thinking there might be a middle path. Not complete isolation, not complete immersion in society. Something balanced. Like selling your work in Marlene's shop," Emma suggested, understanding his meaning. Jack's smile was brief but genuine. "Like that. Taking what the mountains have taught me and sharing it, in small doses. On my terms." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Emma carried Jack's words with her as they returned to the workshop for the afternoon session. A middle path, balance, terms of one's own choosing. These were concepts her father had never presented. As options in Richard Winter's world, success was all or nothing, complete commitment to a predetermined plan. As the winter afternoon faded toward dusk, Jack surprised Emma with another gift, a book of sketches he'd made over the years, documenting the changing seasons around the cabin, the wildlife that visited, the stars that wheeled overhead on clear mountain nights. "I didn't know you were an artist," Emma said, turning the pages with careful fingers. Jack shrugged. "Just something I do to pass the time. Viv taught me. She said drawing something makes you really see it, not just look at it, but understand its essential nature." The sketches revealed a sensitivity and attention to detail that moved Emma deeply. This man, who spoke so little and revealed even less, had been quietly observing and documenting the world around him with an artist's eye all along. "They're beautiful, Jack," she said softly. "You've captured something real here, something most people never even notice." He accepted her praise with a nod, but she could tell her words had pleased him. "Thought you might want to see what your baby will grow up around," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "If you decide to stay in these mountains." The implication hung in the air between them, not a demand or even a request, but a door left open. Jack was showing her what life could be like here, what her child could experience growing up with wilderness as a playground and mountains as a classroom. As evening approached and the time came for Jack to drive her back to town, Emma felt a reluctance to leave that surprised her with its intensity. In just one day, the cabin had reclaimed her, reminding her of the peace she'd found within its walls during that desperate storm. "I'd like to come back," she said as they stood on the porch, preparing to leave. "Maybe next weekend? You could teach me more about woodworking, or show me some of these places you've drawn." Jack's expression lightened, the tension around his eyes easing. "I'd like that," he said simply. On the drive back to Pinecrest, as darkness settled over, the mountains and stars began to appear in the vast sky overhead. Emma felt a clarity she hadn't experienced since before her world had collapsed. Her path forward wasn't yet fully revealed, but the fog was lifting, showing glimpses of possibilities she'd never before considered. A life in these mountains. A child raised with room to explore and grow. Work that engaged her hands and heart, not just her intellect. And perhaps, most unexpectedly, a partnership with a man who understood loss and resilience in ways that gave her hope for her own healing. It wasn't the future she'd been raised to want. It certainly wasn't what her father would have chosen for her. But as the lights of Pinecrest appeared in the valley below, Emma realized with perfect certainty that it was what she wanted for herself and for the child who would depend on her to make the right choices. One step at a time, she reminded herself. The path was becoming clearer with each day. The weeks passed in a gentle rhythm, winter gradually giving way to the first tentative signs of spring. Emma's weekend visits to Jack's cabin became a cherished ritual, each trip deepening her connection to both the man and the mountains he called home. Under his patient guidance, her woodworking skills improved steadily, her fingers growing more confident with each project they tackled together. By her 4th month of pregnancy, Emma had settled into life in Pinecrest with surprising ease. The bookstore thrived under her organizational talents, and Marlene delighted in having a partner who shared her passion for literature. The town's residents had accepted Emma as one of their own, their initial curiosity giving way to genuine warmth as they witnessed her dedication to building a new life. Dr. Carolyn Weber, the obstetrician in the neighboring town of Riverdale, had confirmed that both Emma and the baby were healthy, their progress textbook perfect, despite the tumultuous start to the pregnancy. "You're doing remarkably well," Dr. Weber had told her during their most recent appointment. "Whatever stress you experienced early on hasn't affected the baby's development. Sometimes our bodies are wiser than we give them credit for." Emma had thought about those words often in the days that followed. Her body, Carrying this new life with quiet determination was indeed wiser than she had realized. It knew how to nurture and protect, how to adapt to changing circumstances, how to prioritize what truly mattered while letting go of what didn't. Perhaps, Emma reflected, she could learn from that wisdom in other areas of her life as well. The thought was in her mind one crisp March morning as she helped Marlene unpack a shipment of new books. Outside, the last patches of snow were melting under strengthening sunshine, and the first crocuses had appeared in window boxes around the town square. "I've been thinking," Emma said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "about Jack's offer, the one he made when I first arrived." Marlene looked up from the invoice she was checking, her expression neutral but attentive. "To stay at his cabin, you mean?" Emma nodded, carefully placing a leather-bound edition on the display table. "Not right away, but eventually, after the baby comes. He has more space there than we do here, and it's so peaceful." Marlene set down her paperwork, giving her niece her full attention. "Is that what you want, Emma? To live up in those mountains? With Jack Blackwood?" There was no judgment in her tone, only genuine interest in Emma's happiness. It was that unconditional support, so different from her father's rigid expectations, that gave Emma the courage to answer honestly. "I think it might be," she admitted. "Not because I feel obligated after everything he's done for me, but because when I'm there, I feel right, like I've found where I'm supposed to be." Marlene's smile was gentle with understanding. "I've seen the way you come back from those visits. There's a light in you that wasn't there before." She reached across the counter to squeeze Emma's hand. "If that's what you want, then I'm happy for you. But have you talked to Jack about this? Made sure you're on the same page about what it would mean?" It was a fair question, and one that had kept Emma awake for several nights. Jack's original offer had been made out of compassion, perhaps even out of guilt over his inability to save his own wife and child. Was it fair to accept now that her circumstances had changed? Now that she had a safe haven with Marlene and a place in the Pinecrest community? "Not yet," Emma confessed. "I wanted to be certain of my own feelings first. And I wanted your blessing. I wouldn't want you to think I'm abandoning you after everything you've done for me." Marlene laughed, the sound warm with affection. "Oh, honey, I didn't take you in so you'd feel indebted to me. I did it because you're family, and because it was the right thing to do." Her expression grew more serious. "Besides, it's hardly abandonment when the cabin is only a 40-minute drive away. I expect regular visits, regardless of where you decide to live. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Relief flooded through Emma at her aunt's understanding. "You'll get them, I promise. And you'll always have a special place in this baby's life. I couldn't have made it through these past months without you." "That's what family does," Marlene said simply. "Not the kind of family your father thinks is important. The kind bound by obligation and appearances. Real family, the kind that chooses each other every day, even when it's difficult." The bell above the shop door interrupted their conversation. Both women looked up, expecting a customer, but instead they saw Jack standing awkwardly in the entrance, a large flat package wrapped in brown paper tucked under his arm. "Jack!" Emma exclaimed, pleasure warming her voice. "We weren't expecting you until the weekend." He shifted the package, his eyes taking in the scene before him with careful attention. "Finished a project early. Thought I'd bring it down." He glanced at Marlene. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Marlene assured him, a knowing twinkle in her eye. "In fact, your timing is perfect. I was just about to run some errands in Riverdale. Emma, would you mind watching the shop for a few hours?" It was a transparent excuse to give them privacy, but Emma felt only gratitude for her aunt's tact. "Of course. Take your time." After Marlene had gathered her things and departed with a cheerful wave, Emma turned her attention to Jack and his mysterious package. "So what's this project you couldn't wait to show me?" she asked, genuinely curious. Jack placed the package on the counter with uncharacteristic nervousness. "It's for you." "Well, for the baby, mostly." Emma carefully unwrapped the brown paper, gasping as she revealed what lay beneath. It was a wooden sign, about 2 feet long and 1 foot high, crafted from rich walnut wood. Carved into its surface in elegant lettering were the words, "Winter's Haven," with decorative elements of pine trees and mountains framing the text. "Jack," she breathed, tracing the letters with gentle fingers. "It's beautiful. But I don't understand." "It's for the cabin," he explained, watching her face carefully. "If you decide to make it your home. Thought it should have a proper name. Something that honors your family name, but also reflects what the place could be for you, for both of you." He gestured vaguely toward her growing baby bump. The thoughtfulness of the gift, and the hope embedded within it, brought tears to Emma's eyes. "You still want us there? Even after all this time?" Jack's expression softened in a way she'd seen only rarely. "More than ever," he admitted quietly. "These past weeks, having you visit, teaching you woodworking, showing you the mountains, it's been the happiest I've been since Viv died, maybe." Before, the simple honesty of his words touched something deep within Emma. This wasn't mere kindness or obligation. It was genuine feeling from a man who found emotions difficult to express. "I've been thinking about it too," she confessed. "About making the cabin my home. Our home." She laid a protective hand over her stomach, where the baby had recently begun to make its presence known with gentle movements. "But I need to be sure it's what you really want, Jack, not out of guilt or obligation or because of what happened. With Vivian, this has to be about us, you, me, and this baby." Jack was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes serious as they held hers. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but unwavering. "After Viv died, I thought that part of my life was over. The part where I shared things, built something with someone else." He ran a hand through his beard, searching for words. "I came to the mountains to die slowly, Emma, not physically, but inside, to just fade away where I couldn't hurt anyone else or be hurt." The raw admission broke Emma's heart. She had suspected the depths of his pain, but hearing it confirmed made the strength he'd found, the strength to help her, to open his home and his heart again, even more remarkable. "What changed?" she asked softly. "You did," Jack said simply. "You showed up half frozen on my porch, carrying not just yourself but a new life inside you. Both of you fighting so hard to survive against everything the world had thrown at you." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was impossible not to admire that kind of courage. Impossible not to want to protect it, nurture it. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and placed his hand gently beside hers on her rounded stomach. "This isn't about replacing what I lost, Emma. It's about building something new. Something that honors the past without being trapped by it." As if responding to his words, the baby chose that moment to deliver a strong kick against their joined hands. Jack's eyes widened in wonder, and Emma laughed at his expression. "I think that's a vote of approval," she said, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Jack's smile was full now, transforming his usually solemn features. "Smart kid already." His hand lingered a moment longer before he withdrew it, his expression growing more serious. "I don't expect anything from you, Emma. Not romantically. Not unless that's something you want too someday. The cabin is big enough for us to have our own spaces, our own lives, while sharing what matters." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The thoughtfulness of his offer, his consideration of her independence, her need for space and time confirmed what Emma had already begun to feel. Jack Blackwood was a man unlike any she had known before. A man who understood that true strength lay in gentleness, that real courage often meant vulnerability, that love was not possession, but partnership. "I know," she assured him, "and I appreciate that more than I can say. But Jack," she paused, gathering her courage, "I care about you. Not just as the man who saved my life, or as a friend who's teaching me woodworking. I care about you in ways that surprise me every day." The confession hung between them, honest and unadorned. Jack's eyes never left hers, searching for confirmation of what he'd heard. "I'd like to take this slowly," Emma continued. "To build whatever this is between us with the same care you put into your woodworking. To make sure it's strong enough to last." Jack nodded, relief and hope mingling in his expression. "One step at a time," he agreed, echoing the phrase that had become something of a mantra for both of them. "No rushing, no forcing, just finding our way together. Like you taught me with the wood," Emma said, smiling. "Listening to the grain, working with its natural strengths." The metaphor pleased him. She could see it in the way his shoulders relaxed, the tension easing from his stance. Exactly like that. Later that afternoon, after Jack had departed, with promises to prepare the cabin for her visit that weekend, Marlene returned to find Emma still smiling as she helped a customer select a book. "Well," Marlene said once they were alone, "judging by that glow, I'm guessing the conversation went well?" Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. "It did. I'm going to move to the cabin after the baby comes. Jack and I are going to see where things lead, I suppose." Slowly. Marlene's approval was evident in her warm smile. "Sounds wise. You've both been through so much. Taking time to build something solid is never a bad idea." She paused, then added more seriously, "Have you thought about your father? Whether you'll tell him about the baby, about your new life here?" The question sobered Emma immediately. Richard Winters remained a shadow in her mind, his rejection still a wound that hadn't fully healed. Part of her wanted to shut that door permanently, to build her new life without any connection to the man who had cast her out when she needed him most. But another part, the part that remembered him before her mother's death, the father who had taught her to ride a bike and helped with science projects, and beamed with pride at her accomplishments, longed for reconciliation, or at least closure. "I don't know," she admitted. "Some days I think I should write to him, let him know where I am, that I'm safe. Other days, I'm still too angry, too hurt." Marlene nodded in understanding. "There's no rush to decide. He's the one who broke this relationship, Emma. It's not on you to fix it unless and until you're ready." Over the following months, as spring blossomed fully into summer and Emma's pregnancy progressed, the cabin on the mountain gradually transformed. Each weekend visit revealed new changes as Jack prepared for their eventual cohabitation. The spare bedroom that had once been used for storage was cleared out, painted a soft yellow, the color of hope, Jack had said. Remembering Vivian's words, and furnished with a crib he had crafted himself from pine harvested on his own land. The living room expanded to include a reading nook with bookshelves, built to Emma's specifications. The kitchen garden doubled in size with new beds for vegetables and herbs that would feed a growing family. Most remarkable to Emma was how naturally she and Jack had begun to function as partners. There was none of the power struggle she had witnessed in her parents' marriage. None of the career competition that had characterized her relationship with Connor. Instead, they moved through tasks with easy coordination, each respecting the other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses without judgment or resentment. By her 8th month, Emma had settled into a routine that bridged her two worlds. Weekdays were spent in Pinecrest, working at the bookstore and preparing for the baby's arrival. Weekends belonged to the cabin, to Jack, to learning the rhythms of mountain life and planning for the future they were building together. It was during one such weekend, as August heat shimmered over the forest and the scent of pine filled the air, that Emma received an unexpected visitor. She was sitting on the cabin's porch, a glass of lemonade beside her and a sketchpad on her lap. Jack had been teaching her to draw as well as to work wood, when the sound of an unfamiliar car engine broke the afternoon quiet. Jack, who had been splitting firewood nearby, set down his axe and moved protectively to the porch steps as a sleek black sedan navigated the rough driveway. Emma felt her heart stutter as she recognized the vehicle, her father's car, the same one that had driven her to college orientation 2 years earlier. Richard Winters emerged from the driver's seat, looking as out of place in the mountain setting as a penguin in a desert. His expensive suit was wrinkled from the drive, his normally immaculate hair disheveled, his face lined with what appeared to be exhaustion or stress. "Dad?" Emma whispered, hardly believing her eyes. "What are you doing here?" Richard paused at the sight of his heavily pregnant daughter and the tall, bearded man standing protectively beside her. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his usually confident features. "Emma," he said finally, his voice carrying that familiar note of authority despite the unprecedented circumstances. "I've been looking for you for months." Jack's posture stiffened, and Emma felt a surge of gratitude for his silent support. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Richard glanced at Jack, then back to his daughter. "Your aunt He straightened his shoulders, seeming to come to a decision. "Well then, perhaps we could start with a cup of coffee? I'd like to hear about this life you're building, if you're willing to tell me." It was a small step, hardly the dramatic reconciliation of movies or novels. But it was honest, and it acknowledged the new reality of their relationship, one that would have to be rebuilt from the ground up, if it could be rebuilt at all. Emma looked to Jack, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. His message was clear. "This is your choice. I'm with you either way." "Coffee," Emma agreed finally. "We can start with coffee." As she led her father into the cabin that would soon be her home, Emma felt a strange sense of completion. The circle that had begun with her desperate flight through the snow was closing now, not with a perfect resolution, but with the possibility of healing. The baby kicked vigorously, as if registering approval of this tentative peace. Emma smiled, placing her hand over the spot where her child made its presence known. This little one would be born into a world of complexity and imperfect love, but also one of resilience and second chances. As autumn painted the mountains in brilliant hues of red and gold, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine. Hope Winters, honoring both the grandmother she would never meet and the quality that had sustained her mother through her darkest hours. The birth was straightforward, with Jack holding Emma's hand throughout the labor and Marlene pacing anxiously in the waiting room. When the tiny girl finally arrived, announcing herself with a lusty cry that echoed through the delivery room, Emma felt a love so powerful it seemed to redefine her understanding of the word. "She's perfect," Jack whispered, awe softening his features as he held the swaddled infant for the first time. "Perfect and strong, just like her mother." They brought Catherine home to the cabin, now officially Winter's Haven, with Jack's handcrafted sign hanging proudly by the driveway when she was 3 days old. The mountains welcomed them with a spectacular sunset that painted the sky in colors no artist could fully capture, as if nature itself was celebrating the new life. In their midst, Richard visited a week later, bearing gifts and a tentative smile. The reconciliation between father and daughter remained a work in progress, with boundaries clearly established and expectations adjusted on both sides. But the sight of the stern businessman cradling his granddaughter with trembling hands suggested that genuine change was possible, even for the most rigid of hearts. Marlene became a frequent visitor, her bookish wisdom and practical advice making her an ideal grandmother figure. She brought new books for the baby with each visit, insisting that it was never too early to develop a love of literature. As for Emma and Jack, they continued to take their relationship one step at a time, building their connection with the same care and attention they gave to their woodworking projects. There were challenges, of course, midnight feedings that tested their endurance, adjustments to sharing space and parenting responsibilities, the inevitable conflicts that arise when two independent people create a life together. But there were also moments of joy so pure they seemed to transcend ordinary experience. Catherine's first smile, directed at Jack as he sang her a lullaby his own mother had once sung to him. The morning Emma awoke to find both father and daughter asleep in the rocking chair, the baby secure in Jack's protective embrace. The evening they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance over the meadow, the three of them wrapped in a bubble of contentment that needed no words. On Catherine's first birthday, as friends and family gathered at the cabin to celebrate, Emma found herself standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the people who had become her chosen family. Marlene was deep in conversation with Richard, their former animosity giving way to a cautious respect. Jack was showing Catherine a butterfly that had landed on a nearby flower, his face animated in a way that still surprised those who had known him during his years of isolation. "Penny for your thoughts," said a voice beside her. Emma turned to find Dr. Weber, who had become both her physician and friend during the past year. "I was just thinking about the journey that brought me here," Emma replied, her eyes returning to the gathering. How something that seemed like the end of everything turned out to be just the beginning. Dr. Weber nodded, understanding in her gaze. "That's often how life works. Our greatest crises force us to find strengths we never knew we had, to build lives we never imagined possible." Emma thought about the frightened girl who had trudged through a blizzard, certain that her life was ruined beyond repair. How little that girl had known about resilience, about the capacity of the human heart to find hope in the darkest moments, to build connection where once there had been only isolation. "The cabin needed a queen," she murmured, remembering Jack's words from that long-ago day when he had first offered her shelter. "Pardon?" Dr. Weber asked, not catching the reference. Emma smiled, watching as Jack lifted Catherine high above his head, eliciting peals of delighted laughter from the birthday. "Girl, nothing," she said. "Just remembering something important someone once told me." As she rejoined the celebration, moving to stand beside the man who had become her partner in all things, Emma felt a deep certainty settle in her soul. This mountain, this cabin, these people, they were her kingdom now. Not one built on wealth, or status or meeting others' expectations, but on the far more solid foundations of authenticity, mutual respect, and love freely given and received. The storms would come again, as they always did in mountain country. But winter's haven stood strong and welcoming against the wilderness, a sanctuary built by hands that had known both grief and joy, a home where a child would grow up understanding that true strength lies not in never falling, but in rising each time you fall. And for Emma Winters, once cast out into the snow with nothing but her courage and the life growing inside her, that knowledge was the most precious gift of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.